This is Libby Road and the Sound Epistemology Podcast. This episode includes a visit by Matt Smith to our SE 101 room on the Clubhouse discussion app. We have these rooms most Saturday afternoons at 1 p.m. Pacific Time and welcome anyone who'd like to learn more about street epistemology. This particular room included a couple of great demonstrations of what an SE conversation sounds like, with Matt and Early exploring a claim Early brought up about morality, and later Matt playing the role of the interviewee with his claim about vaccines, with Gina asking the questions. An espresso machine also wanted to chime in, so apologies for some background noise. Let's grind into this episode of the Sound Epistemology Podcast.
So, welcome everyone to the SE 101 room in the Street Epistemology Club, a room for creating critical thinkers. We are currently going to be taking questions from people who are interested in learning about street epistemology. Today we have with us Matt Smith and Quaid, that's also hanging out with us on stage. And they're going to help you answer all your questions. So please raise your hands if you have any questions. We just ask that once your questions has been answered, that you bring yourself back down to the audience so we can let the next person back up. If you'd rather not come on stage, you can tap on my profile picture and send me a message, a back channel message, and I'll ask the question on your behalf. You also have the paper airplane in the bottom right-hand corner, and that's the back channel message, right? But for easier access, you can actually just tap on my profile or any of the moderators for to send a message directly. This room has been created as a learning environment, and it is being recorded. So Matt, if you want to maybe just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll pass the mic on to David.
Yeah, thanks, Early. My name is Matt Smith. I've been involved in one way or another in street epistemology for a while now. I kind of got into it mid to late last year. And one of the things that really got me interested in it was reading that book, How to Have Impossible Conversations, which I thought was really well done and was really practical. And that book described a little bit about street epistemology and mentioned some videos that I went to look at, and I was honestly pretty impressed with like what was going on in some of those conversations that I first saw. And I said, "Oh, this is like a powerful thing." I kind of realized it pretty quickly, and I said, "I need to learn how to do some of this stuff." So I did, and I got involved with it. I started practicing it, and I use it a lot actually in real life, like real conversations with real people, family members of mine, or uh, friends or coworkers, this kind of thing. I have a lot of people in my life who have very different views on things, um, and I don't know. I felt like over the past many years, it's become more and more difficult for people to have conversations at all. So I thought that this was like just what I needed. um, and I've been able to have productive conversations with people who have very different views. So I found it to be really helpful. Um, so yeah, I enjoy doing SC. I also enjoy actually, like having claims examined with street epistemology. I find that to be helpful for my own thinking about things. It's funny. A lot of times you'll have your beliefs about things, but you don't question them too much. You don't think about um, how you arrived at those beliefs unless you really examine it with someone. So I find that helpful both ways. Um, so that's kind of my story. I don't really have like a YouTube channel or anything that I do, at least not yet. So I don't have like videos you can view or anything, but I I enjoy doing street epistemology. I like talking about it, and I'm excited to be here today. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for being here today, Matt. Uh, yeah, my name's David, and I'm a student of Street Epistemology, and I'm excited today to have Matt on with us. He highly recommended, and I feel fortunate to have these rooms so that I can meet uh, other SE practitioners. We just met today, so good to know you, good to meet you. Um, Hopefully, we can answer lots of questions today. Yeah, welcome to Clubhouse, and welcome to our club and our room. And thanks,
Yeah,
Early, for facilitating again today. Um, it's always good to have you and Alfonso's thoughts. And thanks, Quade, for hanging up on stage with us. It's always good to see you here too. Yeah. So if anybody has any questions right off the bat, we can go ahead and get the Q&A started. Um, we're prioritizing people that are new to the room and haven't spent much time up on stage as far as we know. And we also are planning to have an SE demonstration. Um, we could probably start with that early and Matt, if you guys want to, and then hopefully by the time we get that done, we'll have some questions from the audience that we can answer. Does that sound okay?
sure. Yeah.
Sounds okay to me, yeah. And yeah, and anybody in the audience as well, if anybody else does have a belief they want to have examined, feel free to also raise your hands. But yeah, Matt, yeah, I don't know how you want to get started. I can um, maybe just for the sake of the short demonstration, I can start off maybe by giving off my claim or however you like it.
Yeah. Well, why don't we? Um, I mean, if we're going to demonstrate it, I'd want to do a little bit of an introduction before we even talk about your claim, just because
Sure.
actually today is the first day I met you. Is your first name pronounced Early or Airly or?
Early, like yeah, just like early in the morning, early
Okay.
bird gets the worm. Yeah.
Yeah, and Del Orbe, it's like of the ball of the
Of the
earth.
orb, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like the first person to get that actually. Well, at least to say it out loud, at least. But yeah, that's right. The Lord of
Okay.
the
Yeah. I guess we're all of the orb
Orbs, right?
in one
Orb
way
of
or
the
another.
That's true.
Yeah, and so yeah, tell me a little bit about the belief you wanted to talk about or the claim you had.
Yeah. So I'll tell you how I think how I came up with it, and I'll keep it brief because I know it is just a quick demo, but
Hmm.
um, in the Street Epistemology rooms in Clubhouse actually started off in Alfonso's club, the Atheism Club,
Hmm.
where a few of the folks that are actually down in the audience, I hang out with them almost
Hmm.
every day,
Hmm.
and there was something that I picked up from just having those conversations with different theists and beliefs
Hmm.
in regards to morality and how we arrive at morality.
Hmm.
Once you hear it, you'll notice that this happens to also, in some way, possibly line up with some of the things that Sam Harris says.
Hmm.
Um, this was not directly inspired by Sam Harris. It was mostly because of the way I saw my peers interacting with believers on stage.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, my my claim is that when it comes to morality,
Hmm.
we derive morality from the understanding of nature in ourselves.
Okay.
And the way I define that is that the body of knowledge that we accumulate about
Hmm.
how our bodies work, how our biology work. It's how we are informed on what the good and bad things are to be. What the moral things are.
Okay. Could I ask some
Uh,
questions to kind of understand that? Because I'm not sure I'm following you.
sure,
Um,
sure.
so like, um, when you say, okay, I think I get. I think you and I would probably agree on a definition of morality. I think, or at least we know what it means. But like, what do you mean, like, when you say like body of knowledge? Is that like
Yeah,
knowledge about our bodies, or is that just like all the stuff that we learn over a lifetime, or like what are we
yeah,
talking about?
yeah. That's a good question. So the body of knowledge. So over time, by the way, it's been a while since I've had to get into this, and so I'm sorry. Someone just dropped their keys down a vent right in front of me, and that's quite unfortunate. So the body of knowledge is how much we understand about how our bodies work. And
Okay.
so, the fact that we know the reaction that, like, certain poisonous fruits have on our bodies, well, it would be immoral or bad to feed that to someone because it'll hurt them in some way.
Oh, I see.
Uh,
So, okay, so you're talking about, if I understand you right, you're talking about like scientific knowledge we have about how
yeah,
our bodies work, not like what we feel our bodies are doing, that kind of thing.
not necessarily. Now, I understand that feelings is part of what makes us human. So there is a psychological component to human beings.
Yeah.
And so there is the dimension about when I say body of knowledge, there is the dimension of the psychology as well,
Hmm.
where you do take into account also, emotions and feelings, right?
Yeah.
But the more we understand how our bodies work, the better we are about making the like moral decisions or coming up with moral statements about ourselves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I follow what you're saying. So you're saying like, um, if I'm hearing you correctly, like, um, the better our understanding of what's good and bad for human beings, like at a physical level, um, the better the better morality we can develop.
yeah. But I actually leave the good bad part out.
Okay.
Science can't really get into what's good and bad.
Okay.
It only tells you how things work, right?
Okay.
It's only a description of how our bodies work.
Okay.
Science will tell you if eating a certain food will give me a stomach ache, but it doesn't really say whether it's good or bad for me. The good part is something that we put on it, but it's that body of knowledge, right? Once we understand these interactions from that body of knowledge, we can extract moral statements.
Okay. So could you, maybe this would help me understand it, or I think I follow what you're saying, but it would help me if like we could talk about an example. Do you have like an example of something that would fall into this category where like we have some kind of knowledge about how the human body works that informs a moral statement?
Yeah, I can give you an example. One example that actually someone here gave me kind of after they've heard this conversation. There was a study done by Berkeley, I think it was, where they studied the workplace and happiness in the workplace.
Hmm.
And they took a scientific approach to it, to like figuring out what is it that makes us happy. And so they went into studying how the brain works, how your body and your brain is working at work.
Hmm.
And there were factors about the environment at work that were more conducive to happiness at work versus not.
Okay.
And so I can't, again, it's been a while. And I'm sorry, Matt, I didn't come prepared,
No, yeah, I don't. I'm
but
not asking you, but like just like a summary, even.
a
Yeah.
summary, yeah.
Yeah.
So overall, the idea is that it is possible to create a work environment that impedes the function of the person or that makes it harder for the person to work. Maybe putting them in a room with no windows,
Mm,
or
mm,
having a light that's only 2700K kelvins versus like a medium 3200K.
yeah.
So there's
Okay.
certain things that would maybe make it harder for the person to focus or not.
Okay.
So once we understand that, right, I can I can make a decision about how can I create an environment for someone to have a productive day. And if I want them to have a productive day, the right thing for me to do would be to put them in a room maybe that has windows. If I have a room available that has windows, if I have a room that's maybe open and it's more conducive to whatever that study was.
Okay.
Again, I don't have the fact
Yeah.
of the study right now,
Right.
but you can see how if I know this information,
Yeah.
um, I am better able to create a positive environment for the person, and
Okay.
I can also use the same information to maybe take that away from them as well.
Yeah, and actually that's a really good point, and that's what I wanted to ask about because like this all makes sense to me. I hear what you're saying. I follow it. Um, basically you're saying there's a study that scientifically kind of showed that there are certain factors, right, that help make people more productive or effective in their jobs and not at a work site, right, versus other
Right,
things that maybe don't.
right.
But um, how does this connect back to morality, though? So, like, like if I mean, just hypothetically, like if I said, well, I I'm a employer and I want to have employees who do the most work most effectively. Um, and so then it would make sense that I adopt all those things that they say in that study, right? And I'm just wondering, like, where does the morality come in?
The morality comes in the body of knowledge that we have. I'm sorry for the background noise. I'm like sitting behind the espresso machine.
Okay,
Is it very loud?
I can definitely hear it, but go ahead. It's all right.
Um, the the body of knowledge itself does not actually tell you whether something is moral or immoral.
Oh, okay,
Okay,
got it, got it.
and that's why I say that we're able to extract from it, right? And so, with the way that it connects to morality is that you actually, whenever we want to do something moral, we look at the body of knowledge and we do it. So, like for example, and again, tying it back to how I came up with this, often believers have a Bible
Hmm.
that that's where they get their moral things from.
Right.
They get it from a Bible.
Yep.
What I'm saying is, we take that away and we replace that instead with the body of knowledge. And when we want to know what are the good things to do, or or what are the moral things to do, we can extract that from the body of knowledge. But the body of knowledge itself is not saying this is moral and this is not. But from that knowledge about ourselves and nature,
Yeah.
uh, from that knowledge, we are able to extract what are the moral things or not moral things to do.
Okay. How does that extraction work? How do we, like in the specific example of this workplace thing, how do we extract what's moral and what's not from, a collection of studies showing what is, more beneficial for employees at a workplace or some other, scientific study? Like, I mean,
Well, yeah. Yeah, so I mean the study which shows what are the things that are conducive for that make an employee happy at work,
yeah.
right? And again, the study was focused on happiness, right? And I don't know
Mm.
that that's the best way to tie it back to morality,
Oh, okay.
but there were definitely in the study there were definitely it was a scientific approach
Yeah.
at having an environment for a person, for a human, to have a positive experience, to have a good experience.
Okay.
And so the extraction of morality happens when, just basically you have the body of knowledge and basically you want to know what is the good thing to do to this human being. Well, let me go understand. I want to do something good for this person
Mm-hmm.
or with this person. The understanding that I have of how they work, that is how I'm able to know how to extract that.
Okay. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense to me. I think. Uh,
Maybe not.
no, I mean, I think I follow it. I think, like, to basically summarize what you're saying, what I think you're saying is,
Hmm.
we could replace something like the Bible or something like the Quran with basically scientific evidence for what generates, I don't know, well-being or prevents suffering, in humans, or what gives people happiness, maybe, or like
Hmm.
whatever thing you want to optimize for. So I get that. Um, my question is, like, well, I have actually many questions. Um, but I guess, like, imagine a world. This is a hypothetical question. Like,
Yeah.
let's say we had a world where, um, we know we have lots of information about what makes people happy. Okay, and but it's a world where everyone is, like, basically in the matrix, and they're made happy. They're basically living in a dream world, but it's a great world for everyone because they're able to, like, experience exactly the things they want. um like, wh- I guess what I'm asking is, like, wh- why isn't uh, why is it that, it isn't it, is there an assumption that you're bringing in, like, wh- let's say we didn't have, um, this body of knowledge, or we knew less about human flourishing than we do now. Like, would that necessarily be a worse world, or would it be, like, less moral in some way? Like,
I,
if we didn't
I
know?
I think we would be more likely to harm others, or
Mm,
if the less we know about ourselves, the more likely we are to harm others. And I think there's probably evidence for that because I think mythology and stories were informing us on how to treat others more
mm,
than the actual well-being of others,
yeah. What
right?
yeah, what
Mhm.
what are some other ways to generate morality besides this scientific body of knowledge?
Other ways to generate morality. I mean, to generate morality, I mean, I guess some people would say that the way the Bible stories
Yeah.
were a way, right? They
Yeah.
claim that it is anyway.
Okay.
The Quran as well.
Yeah.
Um, the problem that I've had with the claim, Matt, is that it doesn't directly map to the way we have conversations about morality currently.
Yeah.
There's always some authority saying this is good, this is bad. And when we talk about morality, we have that authority saying this is good and this is bad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I get what you're saying. And you're saying
yeah,
this is, like, if your claim
my
is
claim doesn't
true.
map like that. It
Yeah.
doesn't map that
Are you sure it doesn't?
way.
Like,
Go
like,
ahead.
how certain are you that you I mean, like, how certain are you
Yeah,
that
that's a
this
good
claim is
question.
true would be a good question. It,
Yeah, so my certainty that the claim I'm saying is true, I would say that I am, um, you know, right now, last time I talked to David, I think I said 90%.
yeah.
I would say that I'm like at 85 or 80% now, because I think I've forgotten a bit of the verbiage and the ways that I was describing. This is months ago.
Yeah.
But I think for right now, um, my confidence that I'm going to be able to explain this to you, and the confidence that I have in the claim itself, I would put myself like at a 80%,
Yeah.
85%. Yeah.
Okay. And let me ask a question. Why is human well-being something we should optimize for?
It seems to me like human well-being, it's something that we seek. It's within us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so right now, I guess I'm about to get into the more parts that I'm less certain of, right? Because we seem to seek well-being,
Yeah.
and it is our own stories that get in the way, our own beliefs, the own things that we tell ourselves. So it seems like it's a it's something that uh, our bodies are seeking well-being, and I'm not saying that I'm with the um, in decreasing unnecessary suffering, right? Decreasing unnecessary suffering, um, and the antithesis of that, and the opposite of that. I forget what the other one is, but increasing well-being,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I know sometimes you may suffer, but it may be for a net positive, right? At the end, you may have a net positive for that suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think we seek that naturally we seek that, but our own stories get in the way of that.
Mm.
Our own beliefs, or our maybe our ignorance, get in the way of that.
Mm-hmm.
But our nature, the odd part of this is that we do that. That is what we do.
Hmm.
We seek well-being,
Okay.
and it's our nature. Yes, there are exceptions to
What are
this.
some
There are,
exemptions?
well, I mean, psychopath, or people that um, I would say maybe psychopaths, right, where they may naturally uh, enjoy the unnecessary suffering of others.
Mm-hmm. How do we
Um,
handle that kind of exception?
well, first, before I answer that, Matt, I'll say that uh, just for about everything, you probably find an exception,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
I don't feel like that necessarily counters my
Oh, okay.
my claim, but unless you tell
Well,
me wrong,
no, I mean that's fine.
I'm listening. I'm willing to
No, we
listen.
don't have
You
to
know,
focus on it if you don't think it's
yeah.
like I'm more I'm more interested in
Go ahead.
understanding like um
I can answer the question. I think I have a good
okay,
answer for the
okay,
question.
all right.
Yeah. So the more and more we understand psychopathy, the more we the less we see it as this um I may be making some projections here, but it seems like the more and more we learn about it, the better we treat it. Maybe instead of locking somebody up, maybe there's stimulants or medicines that we can give them
Mm-hmm.
to kind of relax that part of the brain, right? And so instead of maybe locking them up, or maybe instead of putting them in jail, or
Mm-hmm.
locking them up in a dungeon,
Mm-hmm.
we are able to give them actual treatment to to actually kind of get them into the medium,
Mm-hmm.
out of the edges, and into the
Okay.
medium. Yeah.
Like do you think it would be possible, like even hypothetically,
hmm
for a religious based morality to be better or more effective in generating well-being than like a scientific based one?
A religious, um, I'm welcome to. Um, I'm happy to hear other examples. The only thing I can come up with now are old stories that we've come up with
Hmm.
as a basis for morality, and I don't. I personally, at this moment, I do not see a way that how that can be better.
Okay. What would you
The,
need to see in order to be convinced that there's a better way of generating morality than using, scientific results of what makes people happy or unhappy?
yeah, yeah. So if I notice that um, the, maybe like to a great extent, a lot of our moral answers actually do not come from the way our bodies work.
Hmm.
A lot of the guys that I hang out with, they'll say things like, "It's the things that we agree on."
The things that we are what?
Yeah, the things that we agree
Oh, the
on,
things we
right?
agree
So
on.
like,
Yeah.
that's how we come up with morality. They say.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll take this moment to say that, like, the reason why I came up with this is, even though they were telling me that the reason why uh, we all kind of think of it the same is because we've agreed on this as a society. We've agreed on what are the moral things or not.
Hmm.
But what I'm noticing is that the things that we perceive to be moral have some connection to our nervous system
Yeah.
or our psychology, or yeah, I'll keep it at those. The
Okay.
psychology or our physiology in some way, which includes the nervous system,
Okay.
right? And so, in order for me to see, I would need to see that there are moral claims, and there are moral answers that do not tie up to that. And I'll give you some. I'm gonna call it ammunition, because there is actually a I'm gonna call it a little box of moral answers that I have not been able to come up with where they come from, right?
Mm.
And I call them victimless crimes.
Hmm.
There are things that we consider immoral right now that don't hurt anyone. It's purely psychological or by principle that they're
Moral
violated.
intuition,
And
basically.
yeah. And so, for example, a peeping Tom is one example that we came up with.
Hmm.
A peeping Tom is not hurting anyone directly. Now, a great explanation someone came up with is that that expectation of privacy is broken.
Hmm.
But what if the peeping Tom never gets found out,
Yeah.
right? What if he never gets found out? Is he being immoral? You know? And so my intuition says yes, absolutely.
What should
But
we?
I can't tie it back to any of the things that I said psychology, because
Yeah.
it's not, the person doesn't know, and it's not physiological either. So, like, where does it fall?
Yeah.
I actually don't know.
What should we do? Like, let's say you have this view of morality that
Hmm.
you think it should be based, I think you would say, mostly on science, or at least to the extent it can be.
Right.
But then others disagree with that. Maybe others think we should base morality on our moral intuitions that we agree about. Maybe some others think we should base it on our experience about what works well and what doesn't, what seems to give a good society and what doesn't. Maybe some other people think that it needs to be based on their religious principles. Like, we have all these people with different views about what generates a good moral system.
Mm.
How do we determine which is the best one? And do you think yours would be better than those? If
Uh, um, I do. Um, the reason why I do is because of my confidence in the scientific method. Any process where, even if it's a religious one, if you are able to confirm and show data that you are, in fact, uh, increasing well-being and decreasing unnecessary suffering, then I don't know. I don't know how I could possibly object to that.
hmm,
I wouldn't be able to object to that. But the moment you're collecting data, the moment you're doing proper analysis, right, and removing the bias,
hmm,
you're doing science,
hmm,
right? And so, the examples I use, even even your grandma trying to figure out the best recipe for that pie.
Hmm.
She's trying to perfect it. She's doing science by just taking
Yeah.
measurements, writing down the results. That's science.
Trial and error. Yep.
Yeah, and so I would say that um, any sort of method where you are doing what I conceive to be science, I would be okay with that. I could not possibly object.
Hmm.
But then I don't know how that would be religion. I mean, it could still be based on religion, um, but I would want to know about it because you were able to confirm it, not just because of faith.
Hmm.
Um,
How do like
eh,
how do
mhm.
we? Maybe this will be my last question, but like, how do we judge scientifically what is contributing to well-being and what is not?
Yeah. So, part of the science, I can tell you something from the get-go. I'm not an expert on the scientific method, and
Okay.
by that I mean there are like you can actually write down the scientific method with like formulas and equations and processes. I don't have that memorized,
Yeah.
but from my perception, part of the scientific method is where you create a process that guarantees you certain degree of confidence of the results that you get.
Hmm.
Part of that as well is you developing the tool that you use to actually come up with these answers, right?
Hmm.
And so and so the the way that I'm sorry, well, sorry, I kind of forgot your question. You said
My
what was
question
the
was
best way?
basically like how do we actually measure well-being? Are we asking people like how good do you feel about this? Like what it, l-
Yeah,
l-
so I
l-
think I remember now where I
yeah.
was going. Yeah, so if the question is a subjective one, right? If we're trying to figure out what is the best temperature to have in a room, that question about what's your preferred temperature, that is a subjective question. And so um, then that would just be a question like what feels best to you. Um, and otherwise, if it's something more, something to do with the biology of the person or the psychology of the person, we would just have to develop a way of measuring that. And I understand that some things, especially about the brain, we still don't know how to measure, and it's purely subjective because we don't have any tools yet to do that.
Hmm.
But we would just either measure it or ask the subject for an answer.
Hmm.
We can also collect data over time, to see the end result
Yeah.
of what happens.
Okay.
That's just measurements.
Okay. I think I understand your view. I hope I hope I understood it correctly. Do you have any
How
questions for
confident
me?
are you? Um, what did you did you perceive any assumptions in what I was saying, or maybe something that didn't map directly like it? And I don't mind whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I agree with your view entirely. There are parts of it I agree with, and yeah, I think there are some areas that are kind of not filled in, at least in my
Okay.
view. But, I'm not saying I'm
Okay.
right about everything. I could be wrong,
Yeah.
but like, I'll just give like maybe two or three points that I thought were interesting. Like one is,
Yeah.
um, you seem to make a claim that you're not bringing in any external definition of what's good and what's not, but actually you are, because you have a normative claim about well-being is good and suffering is bad. And I'm not sure where that comes from other than moral intuition.
Oh, I see.
The second thing
Okay.
is like, I'm curious, and you actually raised a good example, which was kind of in this area, but I didn't want to push on it much more. Was there are limits to our scientific knowledge, And what do we do in cases where we don't have information that tells us what is better or what is not? And um, I think you said, well, maybe in those cases we have to just, you know, try something and then see if it works or see if it doesn't work. Um, maybe do a trial and error thing. Um, I was also curious, like, what should we do in cases where our moral intuitions, by and large, disagree with what that body of knowledge says? Because I mean, imagine that could be the case. Um, so those are some things. Also, like, it wasn't clear to me, thinking through it a little bit, like, um, y- like if I were going to steel man a religious view of this, I would like I would want to ask, like, what is it about the religious stories that make them effective or that make people believe in them, right? Like, because it seems like those are powerful motivators for people, like,
Yeah, they are.
to act a certain way. And I wonder, like, I don't know if this is true, but I wonder if it's possible that, like, even like a moral system that's based on some stuff that's not true but gets people to act in the right way could still be better than a moral system that's mostly based on objective
Oh,
evidence but can give people a compelling story about why they're supposed to act a certain way.
absolutely. No, I am met with that last point. I'm on 100% with you. I extend that line of thinking when I am talking about atheism in general,
Hmm.
where I think that the atheism story is not a great motivator. And I don't think it will, this is completely subjective, my opinion. I don't think it'll be able to scale like a religious story will.
Hmm.
So the power of stories and the role that stories has played in our humanity is undeniable. And if you are able to create a story as a way to motivate people in a certain direction, that is definitely something that is very much natural to us and very, I think so. I 100% agree with you. And this is the power of stories. And I actually acknowledge that as being part of the human experience.
Mm.
And I agree that having a story behind those things may be actually a greater motivator. But I didn't set out necessarily to look for a great motivator
Hmm.
or a way to implement this.
Hmm.
When people have asked me earlier, how would you do this? I actually have no idea how this would be implemented.
Ah, okay, okay.
I have some rough drafts about how it could be done,
Yeah.
but very rough drafts. So no, this is mostly the only goal of what I had in mind was simply to have reliable ways of like figuring out what are the things that don't hurt people and hurt people or that are not necessary. And one of the greatest examples is like female genital mutilation.
Hmm.
It's one of the examples that I sometimes use, but like, that still goes on
Hmm.
in some parts and it's done. Hold on. And it's done because of some of these stories and some of these religious stories.
Hmm.
And so I would say that there is no scientific basis for that. It is something that someone came up with a long time ago. Who knows what the basis for that was? Some man probably came up with that. An assumption of mine,
Hmm.
but and with no basis, no scientific basis. We don't have any proof brings that makes anything better to have female genital mutilation.
If it, let me ask you a question. This may be a little bit
Mhm.
uncomfortable. If the scientific evidence showed that there is good scientific reason to do that procedure, would you then agree that that's what we should do?
That is a very hard for me to a very hard thing for me to utter, Matt,
Why is it difficult for
because
why is it difficult?
it's difficult because the sexual liberation, the the ability for a woman to have sexual pleasure
Hmm.
has been like proven to be something that is healthy for a woman. If a woman is worse off by not having that done,
Hmm.
um, I guess it would be something that I would say that they would have to volunteer for, not something they would certainly would not get forced to do it, right? Because this
No,
is being
remember, this is
forced
a
on.
hypothetical though, where we're saying
Yeah,
it is objectively the science is in. We know the story is that I can't explain how, but by doing this genital mutilation, it improves the lives somehow.
right. But
If that were true, like wouldn't that become moral?
um, it would. I guess it would be moral if they agreed to it, right? Because if the person does not
Mm,
want to put themselves through that suffering, I guess I don't know how I could say like the science is not gonna force that's
mm.
not part of the model, right?
That's interesting.
Creating we're not creating something to enforce on people.
Oh, okay.
It's not like a here's a body of knowledge, here are the things that we extract. Well, let's shove it on people now.
Oh,
It's that when we have a moral question,
okay.
we can have an answer. And none of those things say that we are gonna force this on people. It's just an answer. Here's a moral question. Well, I can have an answer by looking at the body of knowledge, and here's the answer.
Hmm.
But you don't push it on people. We just now know how to answer that moral question.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hear
Yeah.
what you're saying. Um, and
Is
maybe,
there some inconsistency there,
yeah,
or
I think there is. I think you're bringing in a moral
okay?
intuition that forcing someone to do something if they don't want it is immoral. And
A moral intuition, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, you said that a couple of times, and so maybe that's how I'm supporting my claim. And I probably need to look into what this is, moral intuition. So maybe I need to look into what that is. You said that several times. I am not a ethicist. I
Oh,
think
I'm
that
not either. I
I
just,
don't know,
yeah,
but I don't know any of the terminology. You say moral intuition. So I know what intuition is. I think I know what moral is as well.
yeah. I mean,
So I think I know what you mean.
yeah.
Uh,
I think it's
but it
basically,
never
like
registered in my head like that.
if you take like 99 out of 100 people and you ask them, is it okay to like beat someone to death with a pipe? They're probably all going to say no, and that's a moral
Right.
intuition, and you don't really have to be taught that. Um, and like even chimpanzees have moral intuitions. You know, like higher
Yeah.
primates do. So like, I and I think, and don't get me like, I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to
Right.
um, ask like whether you're bringing in some of those moral intuitions.
Yeah. The problem that I have had with um, kind of talking to the philosophers in this app is when they bring in the is odd problem.
Hmm.
And it seems like I'm doing some sort of hop there from the is to the odd, which we're not supposed to do. It seems like a logical fallacy, which I do not want to build a claim, a fallacious claim.
Hmm.
And so it just seems to me like whatever this is odd problem is, okay, and this is also an intuition, is that we just seem to the normal is for us to be that is the way we are. We are the odd part, like we are odding,
Hmm.
made up word.
Hmm.
That's what it seems like to me. Again, this is all original thought. This is the way I see it.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. And like I said, you know, I do agree with you on a number of areas. I just, you asked me like what areas maybe don't I agree with, and so I answered that question. So, but I do broad brushstrokes. I do tend to agree with your view.
Yeah.
Cool. Uh, just to let everybody in the audience know, We are having a one-on-one street epistemology demonstration between Early and Matt. We are taking questions from the audience also. So if you have questions about this conversation or street epistemology in general, raise your hand and we'll bring you up and we'll get those questions answered as soon as this conversation is wrapped up. So
And I
yeah,
was going to
uh,
suggest too, like if there are people in the audience who would like to try it out, like I always enjoy doing this, but I can like steel man a claim. I could pretend I believe something that I don't really believe, or I could even, you know, give a claim that I do actually believe, and then you could try to ask street epistemology style questions about it, and I can give you feedback on maybe how to ask it, or what would be a better way to do it, or what kinds of questions you should ask, what kinds of questions maybe you shouldn't, if that would be helpful.
I actually got a question from the audience.
Okay.
Um, has Have you had conversations where the goal was simply to understand and clarify the claim?
Yes. Yeah, I have. I've had really difficult conversations with people where I felt like it was just a victory to understand what they were saying. Like that was just to get to that point, like it was like a sense of satisfaction. And it's not because they were necessarily doing a bad job of explaining it. It's because like I really like just couldn't follow what they were saying. Um yeah, that happens a lot. And like I think in street epistemology, like you have to have like really modest goals, at least in my view. Like, yeah, you can use street epistemology sometimes to maybe change someone's view, possibly if they're open to it. Um, they have to they have to, be willing to reconsider their view, and street epistemology can help with that. But most of the time, it's really just really understanding exactly what they're claiming and why they're claiming it. And often the process of that can cause them to question whether they really believe it as strongly as they say. But yeah, the answer to the question is yeah. I've had conversations where it's just like with conspiracy theory kind of beliefs. Often this happens. Just tell me again. Like how does this conspiracy work? Who did what, and how do we know? And and you spend 10 minutes doing that. Okay, yeah, I think I hear what you're saying. Thanks for the conversation. Yeah, that happens.
Um, I feel like in our conversation, Matt, we in the beginning it was kind of like that, and I think you finally understood what I was trying to say, and it's just from your understanding. Like if I wanted to just maybe do some Google searches and study this, would you say that moral intuitions is maybe what I maybe using to support this, and maybe what I gotta look up and kind of
Yeah,
understand more?
yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, that's good. I do want to know those things, so I'm glad I know that.
thanks for bringing your claim up and early, and thanks Matt for agreeing to examine that with him. Uh, I thought that was good. I think I understand Early's claim and reasons a little bit better now. I was wondering, Early, if you wouldn't mind maybe comparing that conversation with maybe some differences that you saw in some of your other conversations with other SE practitioners, like maybe contrast them and uh, maybe talk about that a little bit.
Um, yeah, that's an interesting answer, David. So I had a great conversation with you. One of the things that I liked about your conversation was this is, I think you were, no, I think Reed was the first one, and I think you might have been the second one. And it was about me looking into definitions and also how this process mapped to each other. And so definitions and actually coming up with like what would inform what and where would things be coming from and to where. It's kind of like a flow chart, right? And so that the conversation that I had with you and Reed helped me do that. The interesting thing, the conversation with Matt, the reason why I enjoy this conversation, man, and David, you may be able to, you're probably gonna guess what I'm gonna say. I do like the conversation to be a bit more forward, and I'm using the word forward to say, like, well, it seems like there's a gap here, or you're making some assumptions. I want to know, like, I seek to know that. I want to know what are the holes that I have in my arguments, and so at the end, earlier, I asked him, to give me what are the things that he thinks, because I wanted to know those things. And I think with Reed and with you, you guys didn't give me that. What I did get out of you guys is that I didn't have definitions. And I didn't really understand the model that I was creating in my head. And I think I understood it a little bit better after the you guys' conversation. With Matt, it's like those assumptions are that I'm doing. He's kind of, we're exploring it a bit more direct, which I enjoy. I don't know if you can tell David what I mean by that.
Yeah, I think so. You would it would be your preference that at least with this claim, you want the stress test to be a little bit more robust. Would that be a good way to put it?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, that last question that I asked was really a stress test. You know, like, because if I understood your claim right, you're saying we should base morality to the extent possible on objective scientific information. And so I was asking if the objective scientific information contradicted with something that you, I guess, have a moral intuition about, would would you be okay with that? And I think the answer was no, you wouldn't be okay with that. And that's an interesting thing to
Oh,
consider.
well, no, I didn't disagree with that. I think it would be up to the person, especially if there's suffering
Yeah.
involved, like a painful process of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
FGM. Yeah,
Right.
it
No,
would be up to
yeah,
the
I
person.
get that. I get that. But like, at base level, it seemed like there was an intuition that like we shouldn't do things to people if they don't want it to be done. Like, um, it, and I actually share that intuition with you. So don't get me wrong, but like, I do think that that's an intuition.
And it's not
Maybe
science. It's not the science I'm talking about.
maybe what Matt's getting at is we're trying to figure out if that's the real reason or if how much weight does that reason actually support in your confidence about the claim being accurate.
Right. Like I could make it even more ridiculous and say, suppose the balance of the information said that we would have the most well-being in society if everyone had to amputate their legs. It's ridiculous, right? And there's no reason to expect that it's true. But suppose it were. Like, would you be on board with saying, morally speaking, this is what we all have to do, right? And I mean, these are the kinds of questions you have to ask yourself
Um,
in moral philosophy, I think.
A way of probing the limits,
Yeah,
so to
yeah,
speak.
right.
Yeah.
yeah, but I again, when you said have to, this is again, you've correctly spotted where the weaknesses of my claim is, because when you said have to, well, I don't, there is no have to. Yeah. And I missed, Matt, what was the ridiculous thing that you said, that the example you brought up
Oh,
at the end there?
suppose, yeah,
I missed
science
it.
determined somehow that if everyone were to amputate their legs, we'd have a society with more well-being and less suffering. Like maybe if you amputate your legs, people could live twice as long and have fuller lives.
Yeah, but I don't. If the person prefers to be able to use both of his legs, and that to him is a fuller life, then that's not something that he would take on. Yeah, he would.
Yeah, but the science doesn't agree with that, right? Even though that guy's saying that, he's wrong. Right?
I don't. I wouldn't say that he's wrong. It's. I don't think it's the way I'm looking at it is not a matter
Okay.
of him being right or
Okay.
wrong. Him doing it on himself, it's his choice.
Okay.
And this process,
Yeah.
part of this process, does not force that on anyone.
Okay. Well, so let me
What?
let me frame it a little bit differently in a way that
Okay.
this could actually be realistic then. Because this may actually be true. Let's say that the scientific balance of evidence says that it's unhealthy to be overweight, and there are people who um, enjoy eating too much and not exercising, and therefore they're overweight. And people would have better lives, objectively speaking. Let's say the science says, objectively speaking, people will be healthier, they'll be happier, they'll have longer lives, they'll suffer fewer illnesses, everything will be better, less suffering, more well being if they were not overweight. Um, does that imply that like we should do something about that? Like it would be immoral to let people be overweight? Or I guess in your view, you'd probably say no because we still shouldn't force that on them if they don't want it. But like maybe they
Right.
would want it long term, but they can't. Short term, they always just want to have the next meal. Like these are the kinds of difficult trade-offs that real humans have, right?
So this is the way I would see it. So I think I have a. I'm confident of my answer, understanding that I may be doing one of those fallacies or moral intuition things. It would be wrong to purposely create a commercials, advertisement, images, use colors that trigger people to get hungry and therefore increase the chances of more people being obese in a group of people in a society.
Okay.
Once we understand how we can um, entice or stimulate that whatever part of the body that makes people eat and eat and eat and eat, if we figure out how to do that and we just let organizations, companies, I think it would be immoral to do that, right? To impose that on someone. But if someone wants to eat, um, their autonomy, it's, and I haven't thought about hierarchies or what comes first. I think I forget what if it's a philosopher, somebody, the hierarchy of needs. I
Maslow.
forget what
Yeah.
that's, yeah. But I forget if autonomy is on there or not, but
No, it's not.
um, it's not. Okay. So regardless, I don't, it would be wrong for an organization to come up with a way to make people obese on purpose and less healthy. You're basically taking life away from them by psychologically manipulating them.
Hmm.
But I don't see how I could force people, individuals, to do something because we found out that there's a better way. I I, I don't this this is not part of the model. There is no have to.
Hmm.
There is no people have to in any of the model that I'm thinking about.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there is a have to. I would want to impose that organizations not use manipulation in order to get people
Hmm.
to be obese for their gain.
Hmm.
That, that would be like I would be okay with like creating legislation around that.
Okay. What about the reverse? What about manipulating people to not be overweight, to be healthy weight?
I I I don't see how that's not part of the model that I would have. I don't see
Okay.
how I could justify that.
Okay. So neither of those would be justifiable. Okay.
Yeah, I you know I'm trying to think about when would I do that. I'm trying to be like a bit answer your question. I guess there would have to be some sort of scenario where you are harming others by being overweight. Maybe
Hmm.
I'm for people in the audience. I'm kind of stretching this out a lot here, right? So I'm trying to answer Matt's question. Um, and so I don't know. I don't know. It would have to be something like that. Maybe
Well,
maybe
so like
people are getting hurt or
cigarette
something.
smoking would be an example where it has effects on people around you, right? We
Yeah, and most states have stopped that.
Is that
There
is
is,
that okay in your view to not allow people to smoke because you're
in my view, yes, in my
why?
view, it is okay to not let one person harm another person unwillingly. No, do not hurt
Uh,
the person next to you.
okay.
And I'm okay with creating legislation to
Yeah.
not create a space where people are hurting other people that are unwilling to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, harm is one of the key moral psychological motivators, right? That's like a pretty base thing, and that's normal for people to not want to.
right.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, either for me or for Matt or about street epistemology as a whole, feel free to raise your hands. It's open floor, so you can feel free to come up, or you can send me a back channel message, and I'll ask the question on your behalf.
And if again, I'd like to say too, if people would like to try it even just for a little bit, I think a good way I've done this with people in the past is I can I could pretend to hold a view that whatever you want, and then you can try to ask questions, and I could give you feedback on if those are good, street epistemology questions or not, if they're asking the right thing or if they're asked in the right way. I think that's a good way to actually practice or to understand the kinds of questions you had to ask. For some people, it's a little bit difficult, like to not actually fight or debate about what the person's saying, but instead to ask them why they believe it, and what are the reasons, and how did you determine that those reasons are good reasons. That's not um, natural for a lot of people, and it certainly wasn't for me when I started.
Matt, could I ask a question about probing the limits?
Y-
We were talking about that a little bit ago.
yeah.
Um, how do you go about deciding how much to probe the limits in a conversation? Like what do you use to tell you when it's okay to probe limits, when it's not okay? Like what's the criteria that you use that helps guide your um decision on how much to probe limits with someone's claim?
Yeah, the main thing is rapport, and you have to constantly kind of judge rapport as the conversation's unfolding in real time. And if you start to sense that the person you're talking to is getting a little bit frustrated, maybe a little bit mad, or he's not able to express himself, or he feels like you're not listening to him, or maybe you're doing a great job and he's just not in a good mood, right? It may not be your own fault. Then sometimes it can be perceived as a little bit pushy to ask questions that probe the limits. Um, but if that's not true, if you're having a generally good question and you ask it in the right tone, it's usually goes over okay. It needs a lot of the questions, especially like when you're probing limits or you're asking like um, questions about their belief. They really need to come from a legitimate place of curiosity. Like the person needs to feel that you're asking it because you really want to know. You're not asking these questions to like score debate points, right? Like it's not like Yeah, have you ever considered this limitation on your view? No, it's not like that. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting like moral principle, say. Like, do you think it would apply in this case too? Why or why not? And if not, like what's different? And they probably have an answer, right? There's an answer about something that's different. Maybe they haven't thought about it, but now they are. Those are the kinds of questions you want to ask. It needs to be like framed um, the right way. Like you're curious to know. Like uh, I've done that. Like for example, with I'm trying to think of a conversation I had where oh yeah I had a good conversation one time actually on Discord doing street epistemology with a person who was a vegan, and so he was arguing that his claim was basically like I'm simplifying, but his claim was something like, eating meat is kind of like murder, right? Um, and and I listened to that, but so you know, would it be okay if I like ask you some questions, to kind of probe the limits? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, like if I'm just trying to understand, like, how far do you take this? If eating animals is murder, is like having horses pull a plow slavery? Like, if not, why not? Like, what are there are there any distinctions between like and it's just like a legitimate question, like you want to know, like if animals have all the same rights, as humans do, and maybe they do, I don't know, like, or maybe someone thinks they do, like, then what other rules do we have to apply to animals that maybe we're not, like, is it okay to own a dog or a cat? Is that like indentured servitude or something, um so those are the kinds of questions.
Welcome Gina to the stage. Real quick, Matt, it's that last question. This is more about parenthetical comments. I think it was the year before last where some people were persecuted by law because they were using monkeys as I think it was like to bring down climb on coconut trees and like bring down coconuts.
Oh, okay.
And there were people that were actually persecuted for that.
Oh, okay.
Which I thought it was an interesting story, kind of like tangentially maybe related to this.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah, no, I was just going to welcome Gina up to the stage. Welcome. Feel free to ask your question or make a comment. Good
Hey
to see you.
guys, thank you. Good to see you guys. Matt, as always.
Yeah, good to talk with you.
How you been?
I'm doing well. Yeah.
Cool. Um, I actually wanted to suggest practicing SE here. I would like to question Matt if that's okay with him.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. Is there a claim you like? Did you want me to give a claim, or do you want me to like
Sure, yes,
steal mine?
absolutely. Whatever. Either way.
Yeah. In fact, I was just thinking about. It's funny. Like I think about claims at the weirdest time, like when I'm washing dishes, and I never like write them down, and then like later on when I'm thinking, I wonder what I should talk about. Like I forget forget what I was saying. Um. Yeah, I have a claim. Let's see. Like, what's something I believe? Um, I think that the this can sound kind of stupid, but this is a legitimate thing, and this is maybe in the news. Maybe you've read about it. I don't know, but um, there's a new drug that Merck. Well, actually, there are two different drugs. Merck has one, and Pfizer made the other. These are antiviral drugs that will treat COVID. Um, like once you get it, you can take this medicine, and it's like apparently like 90% effective at reducing deaths by half or some large number, which is great. And so my claim is that well, let me give a little bit of backstory, is they stopped that trial for ethical reasons. What that means is they didn't feel it was ethical to continue it because they were not giving the control group the medicine, and those people were suffering as a result. Okay. So then they stopped the trial, and that's that. I think that my claim is that if they're going to do that, then they need to just approve the medicine for use. Like the FDA should just approve it. Like they shouldn't stop the trial until the medicine is approved, because that's silly. So like now they can't research the medicine because it's like too effective. And yet like we want better data to know how effective it is, and let's be able to convince people that this is good medicine and we know why, right? So, you want to I think that's kind of a silly situation. So again, my claim would be that the FDA, or they should continue doing clinical trials on medicine like that until it's approved in the country in question.
Okay, that's a lot to take in. Let me try to paraphrase that
Okay.
back, because I think I do remember the study you're talking about. I maybe read it somewhere, where there's a treatment or vaccine for COVID that wasn't actually given to a control group, and as a result, they got sick from it. Um, and because of that, they stopped the clinical trial, like just shy of having FDA approval. You think that instead of stopping, they should have continued until they had approval. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah. Yeah. That is, in this case, it doesn't happen to be a vaccine, but it would apply to a vaccine too. Like, they shouldn't stop doing trials on vaccines until they're approved. Um, and honestly, like with vaccines, you can continue to take data as you're administering the vaccine, so the effectiveness. But like with these medications, like they're trying to decide, is this like doctors can't actually prescribe the medication until it's approved, right? Um,
Right.
and yet, we have like 1,000 people dying a week from COVID or more, depending on the day. And so, like, every day that they delay approving the medicine is like another 100 people who die. And like that shouldn't be okay in my view. Like, we want to know that the medicine's effective. That's why we do clinical trials. So if we're going to stop them for ethical reasons, that must mean that we think it's effective. If we think it's effective, then say it's effective and let people prescribe it. Right? That's my view.
Instead of stopping the trial, how could they have changed the trial to make it more effective?
What do you mean? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Um, okay, so you were saying that they shouldn't have stopped the trial. What would be your next best option? What would you like to have seen instead?
Yeah, well, maybe okay, that's good. Yeah, a good question. What they could have done is they could have like notified the FDA and the equivalent of that in the UK and other countries, and said, "Hey, we've got this medication. We think it's really effective, and we're just going to keep testing it until you give us approval. But we think you should give us approval, and we'll submit the application for approval right now because we already have this result. But we're going to keep taking data." That would be like my ideal result. And yeah, What else could they do instead of stopping it? They could do that. They could just continue the trial. I mean, I don't know. Like it's like I think it's kind of binary. It's like either you stop the trial or you don't. I mean, I guess they could slow it down, but why would they do that? Like, I don't know. I think it's kind of a binary thing in this case.
What other ways could they change the trial to make it more ethical?
That's a really good question. I mean, it's a difficult question, right? You do a clinical trial to establish whether a drug is safe and effective, right? Well, you do it at this point to establish it's effective. They already know it's safe at this point. But so what could you do to make it more ethical? They already have like an institutional review board, an ethics board. And that was the board that actually stopped the trial in this case. So that's a good way to make sure things are occurring ethically is you have an institutional review board and they're not involved in the actual trial, so they have no incentives to see it continue or have it stopped, right? Beyond the ethical concerns. And they're the ones who stopped it. So that's already in place. Make it more ethical. I suppose you could have like the people doing it make sure they know like what is expected in terms of like medical ethics and not, so that they're not going to do anything that would be like untoward. Certainly they wouldn't. They want to know like they have to not fake data. They have to do things properly. They have to keep track of stuff correctly, right? Those are all good practices. I yeah, I think it's more ethical. I don't know. There's a balance here, right? Like on the other hand, on the one hand, you don't want these people to suffer needlessly in the control group. I get that. But on the other hand, like we really want to establish with good certainty that this drug is effective. And now, like my personal view is that the FDA is way too conservative on this stuff, and they should just approve it based on the preliminary data, and then we could see as they administer it to real patients, they can keep track of it and they could show that it's effective that way. That way they save a whole bunch of lives. But that's not the way the FDA operates. So I don't know if I answered your question. I guess I gave some examples of things that they could do to make sure things are going ethically.
Mm-hmm. What would be the potential harms of continuing the trial anyway?
Well, people could die. People could have really bad COVID cases in the control group. Of course, they could even have bad cases in the non-control group. Maybe there is like a bad interaction that the drug can cause, right? But I think like in the bigger picture, that's useful to know, right? That's precisely why we're doing the trial in the first place. But yeah, more people will die. But like, there's a balance of like people dying in the clinical trial who would have died or who would not have died conditional on them getting the medication versus all the possible people in the future who will get COVID who may not die because this drug is now proven to be effective. I don't know. Like my personal view is like I think the standards need to be lowered at the FDA for some of this stuff, so that we can try, you know, these medications without it being a big deal, and then we'll be able to like have the best medications available for COVID patients quicker. I think it's a real scandal that it takes FDA so long to approve things. But maybe that's not exactly this claim, so it's a different story.
What are the benefits for these high standards with the FDA?
Well, the main benefit is, I think if you were to talk to the FDA about it, they'd say the main benefit is that it keeps the trust in the institution high, right? We know that because we have these high standards, that if it meets FDA approval, that means that it's not, it's going to be effective and no one has to worry about that. That's what they would say. And I think that's the main consideration in the way they act, is that they want to protect the bureaucracy from a loss of trust, right? If you're the head of the FDA, the last thing you want is a scandal where you approved a medication that shouldn't have been approved, right? So that's where the institutional bias is. I get that, but I don't think that's the most important consideration, although I do agree it is a consideration.
Why is something like this important to you?
It's important.
Matt, you muted yourself in case you didn't know that. We cannot hear you right now.
We lost you, dude.
Yeah, again, Matt, you muted yourself, so we're not able to hear you right now. Gina,
He might have lost connection.
yeah, maybe. How do you think the talk's going so far, Gina? Just curious what your thoughts are right now.
I don't know. I'm just trying to keep my own head together and focus on that. Um, I think it's going well.
I really like the question you asked about why is this important to you? That's one of my favorite questions ever. You can you can get a lot of information from that question, I think.
I think that's a question I learned from Rom and from another friend in the audience here. Um, um, I know you know Rom. You've had him like twice here.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Yeah, he's fantastic.
I learned a great deal from him from the Saturday practice sessions on the SE Discord. Um,
Um, have you thought about um maybe trying to restate your conversation partner what they're saying? I think if
More
there's anything I
paraphrasing.
might, yeah, like sometimes it helps them to hear what they're saying back to them, maybe in your own words, can help can help them understand themselves a little bit more, I think. I, I really like the questions that you're asking. They're fantastic. Um, I might I might uh I might like to hear a little bit more of repeating back what they're saying. But like I said, I think the questions that you're asking are really good.
Okay. Thank you for that feedback, David. I appreciate it. When we get Matt back, I'll definitely. Oh,
That's
hey, welcome back.
sorry, I don't know what happened there.
We
Oh,
can
it's
hear you
I
it
think
now.
worked.
um I think when where we left off was I that we were asking like what the benefits and the possible risks
Yeah.
of um of a lower standard for the FDA
Yeah.
I remember you saying that um, that there's a risk of people dying from a hastily approved from a medication that's approved too fast.
Right. Yeah. That's a real risk, and I accept that risk, but we have to balance that risk against the 1,000 people that are dying a week from COVID in this particular case. But in any case, right, like even with any medication, right, there are downsides to not um, approving medication. I get it. Like though the risk is that if they don't take their time and do all the right procedures, that maybe you get like a medicine that's not safe approved, and then people die as a result. I think that's like what they're really worried about. I just think they're they need to move the lever more towards faster approvals. Like I think they're biased too far to let's really 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 make sure this is safe.
How far could we move that lever and still make sure it's safe enough?
It depends on the medicine. It depends on what they're proving. I don't think there's one easy answer because the data that they require depends on the type of disease and stuff, and how many patients there are, and how easy it is to do a clinical trial. Sometimes they can't even really do a clinical trial because there's so few patients a year. But how far? I think I would say quite far would be my view. It could move quite a bit towards faster approval. Um, to give another example, like I think it was a bit of a scandal how long it took to get the vaccine approved for kids age 5 to 11. I think they could have had that approval done in the summer, and it was only done like a few weeks ago. They could have been working more closely with the companies. The kids could have been vaccinated before the school year started. Um, it's like I just don't like. Just so you understand, like it just doesn't make sense to me. Like it's a pandemic. We've got like 100,000 people dying a year or whatever it is. Like, is there even a choice to make? Like we it's already established that the vaccine is safe. The question of effectiveness, I mean, yeah, is it 90% or 70% or 80% or what's the right dose? Yeah, these are questions, but like people are dying every day. Like every day that they delay means people die. Like I don't know. It's just pretty obvious to me that they've like overcompensated. They're being overly conservative. Um, there might be. I'd be willing to say there might be some cases where they're being too aggressive. Um, but that I think that's much rarer.
For another comparison, would you rather have um, a medicine that was approved in a matter of days or weeks that was only about 50% effective, or medicine that took months and was 90% effective for something where there's a high death rate like COVID?
I would want both, and I'd be willing to take the 50% effective stuff right now, and then take the 99% effective stuff 2 months from now. Right?
If you could only have one, which would you prefer?
Oh, if I could only have one. Now you're making me choose.
Yeah, sorry.
Um, I would sign up to be in the clinical trial. 99% effective stuff. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure I can give a good answer to that. It would probably depend on how serious the disease is and how likely I were to be seriously affected by it. In the case of COVID, I'd be willing to wait a couple months because I can work from home mostly and it doesn't affect my life so much. But, if I were 70 years old, 80 years old in a nursing home, yeah, give me the 50% stuff right now.
So you also take into account like the stage of life the members of the clinical trial are in, like how urgent is it for them?
Yeah. Yes. Right. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, if everyone in the clinical trial is 75 and they're going to die if we don't give them the medicine, I mean, I get it. I get the ethical consideration. So I'm not saying like they shouldn't have stopped the trial. I'm saying if they're going to stop the trial, then they should have approved the medication, right? So everyone could get it. I mean, if it's good enough for the people in the control arm, why isn't it good enough for anyone, right?
Right, I think I follow. How are we doing with time? Are we okay to continue? Would you like to take a break here?
We've got about 15 more minutes left in the room. I know it goes by super fast.
Yeah, it does.
And
It does.
this has been great though. And I don't think that we have any questions in the queue. Early, are there any back channel questions or anything? Otherwise, we can keep going for a little while longer if you guys want to.
Yeah, no,
Matt,
I
how are
don't.
you feeling?
Yeah, I'm okay to continue. Or, I mean, we could even, if you want, I could steel man the claim I don't believe. That's always interesting.
I enjoy your steel, man. Really,
I wanted to just say real quick. I think Gina is doing a wonderful job, and
She's doing a great job. These are
yeah,
really good questions. I agree with you.
yeah, and there's a lot going on in this Discord. Like I may have to spend some time there as well.
Yeah, this court is kind of where I grew up. It's my street epistemology childhood home.
Oh wow.
mine too. Matt and I both grew up there.
Yeah, yeah.
um, I've had many wonderful conversations with Matt and others there. Um, so if it's okay with you, Matt, we can continue.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool,
Go for
cool.
it.
Thanks. Um, so I think we left off on we were talking about how how a medicine that's good for a control group should be good for everyone. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if if the preliminary results show that the medicine is that effective, that they felt they had to stop the study and ethically give the patients with COVID the medicine, right? Then it sounds like we have our conclusion, right? So if we have our conclusion, then the FDA should just have it approved. So there's not this like weird in between point where like it's effective and yet it's not approved. Yeah.
All right. I don't think I asked you your confidence on this claim before. Um, where do you stand on this? How strongly do you feel about it?
I'd say maybe like a 6 out of 10. Like
6 out of 10.
there might be stuff that I don't know um, about like how ethics review boards operate that are like not obvious to me. Things that, if they were to explain it, I might say, oh yeah, I didn't think about that, or maybe the same thing could exist at the FDA, where they say, Matt, you say you want this approved immediately, but did you know X, Y, and Z? I say, oh, no, I didn't know X, Y, and Z. That's a good point, and those could possibly change my confidence, although I do have to say, remember, 1,000 to 2,000 people a week, right? So it has to be pretty good reasons.
So why is a claim like this important to you? I think that's why we got cut off before.
Yeah, it's important because we've got a pandemic going on, and everyone wants it to be over, and it would be over faster, and fewer people would die if this medicine were available right now. And it's not available right now because it doesn't have FDA approval.
If a new clinical trial could be started, giving the control group the medicine for COVID, and it will accelerate just to make sure the medicine was still safe, would you accept that kind of compromise?
Yeah, like you're saying, if they were to start a new trial where this other one left off, basically, or
Yeah.
yeah, I'd be okay with that, right? But I think that's not the case. Yeah, that's a good point. I'd be okay with it. Like maybe in the case of this particular clinical trial, there were some things that they had to agree to, like if it were such and such effective, then we're going to stop the trial and give the control arm the medicine. But maybe they start a new trial where that's not the case because we really need to know if it's effective. And I'd be okay with that. But I don't believe that's actually the case. I think they stopped that clinical trial and there are none of them going on right now.
Okay, so it just stopped that completely.
Yeah, that was the one clinical trial they were doing, and now there are none that are happening.
Okay. What could raise your confidence in this claim that they should have continued the clinical trial?
Um, like, yeah, good question. Here's an example of the kind of thing I worry about. You're aware that we have people who think that the vaccine is not safe and not effective, right? We call them sometimes anti-vaxxers, but one of the things that fuels that to a degree is a lack of good evidence that the medicine is actually safe and effective. And by stopping a clinical trial early, you make that more of a possibility. So if after this medicine is approved in 3 months, if we have people saying things like, oh, did you know that they could only do that study on like a few hundred people? And that based on the statistics, it's not even clear that it's effective. And they could plausibly make that argument because the margin of error is pretty wide. That would increase my confidence that the FDA should have approved this, when they stopped the trial, or actually that they should have kept doing the clinical trial, really, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have 10,000 people or 100,000 people who take the medicine and 90% of them, do better and compared against the control is pretty obvious, then you can't really argue against that. I mean, you can if you're an anti-vax kind of person, but at least you're not arguing based on the scientific evidence. But right now, there's a reasonable argument to say, do we really know it's effective? Although I suppose if it's really 90% effective as we start giving it out, we'll find out quickly whether it really is 90% effective.
Is effectiveness and safety your two main concerns?
Yes.
Are there others that, what others could you be not considering?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think there is anything else. There were some people who were arguing that like the FDA needs to keep in mind, like, when they were arguing or deciding on whether to allow booster shots in the US, they said we're going to restrict it to people 65 or older unless you have some kind of condition, right? And I heard that one of the reasons they did that is not because it wasn't safe for people younger and not because it wasn't effective for people younger. It was because they wanted to have enough vaccine supply for other countries. So maybe that could be a reason. That's not a reason I would accept because that's not the FDA's mandate, right? Like the supply of a drug should not determine whether or not they approve it. That's actually more like in the CDC's job description. But anyway, those safety bureaus are really for the US, not for whatever other countries we ship the vaccine to. So I suppose that might be one factor. I don't know.
So we've got just a couple more minutes left here.
Okay.
So just keep that in mind. Maybe a couple more questions, Gina, and we'll wrap it up. I really appreciate this conversation happening. And once again, Matt, thanks for coming into our room today and hanging out. You're welcome to come back anytime you like.
Thank you.
Gina, thanks so much for coming up on stage and practicing SE. And Early, thanks for running the room again. Alfonso, always a pleasure. Quaid, thanks for hanging out. Yeah, a couple more questions and we'll wrap it up for the day.
Okay.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for inviting me up. And Matt, for this conversation. I always
Yeah.
enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, I gotta say you did a better job of like the good street epistemology questions. Like I had a good discussion with Early, but I felt like we were not doing quite as much standard SE. It was a little bit more like exploration, a little bit less like SE vanilla, so to speak. But it was a good conversation either way. But for demonstration purposes, I think actually your conversation with me is better for
Thank you.
people who are interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad this happened. I'm glad Gina came on. My belief is a bit convoluted and, dare I say, malformed. Maybe I still gotta work on it a little bit. That's probably explains it. But yeah, I'm glad Gina contributed. That was great.
Okay, well maybe that's a good point to wrap it up.
Thank
Oh,
you, Matt. Thank
Thanks
you,
for having me on.
everyone.
Alfonso, I saw you on mic where you wanted to share something maybe before we end it.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you guys, and I've been watching. Like I said at the beginning, I had a room scheduled with a Muslim who asked me to do an SE with him. I actually was gonna ask Matt to, allow me to question him just before Gina came in, and yeah, I'm always just too entertained, between the twins and house chores and all these
Okay.
excuses I can come up with.
Yeah.
And I get really frustrated because I wish I could sit down and focus and concentrate. That's what I was planning on doing tomorrow. But what I wanted to say is, yeah, I think that the vanilla term for street epistemology is a really good one because I I was fascinated this week by watching Anthony I hadn't really. I only seen a few of his videos and a little bit by Reed,
Hmm.
and but I really liked. So we get this criticism that SEers are actually have a to put it in Dawkins' words this morning, nefarious agenda. And he quoted. I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read Manual for Creating Atheists this week, and then probably next week, Greater Conversations, the second book.
The joke, Alfonso, at least on Discord with that, is that Manual for Creating Atheists is the Old Testament. The New Testament is how to have impossible conversations.
Yeah, I've heard that before. And I think I'm going to be hanging out in the Discord more. I've been there a couple of times just listening in.
Yeah.
I didn't have the courage, or like I said, I'm still driving my gears to get into the SE mindset. But I think Anthony's videos are really good. All his tutorials and the lectures he gives. And I think he got me a little bit more interested in challenging people, helping people challenge themselves. Sorry for the cuckoo.
Yeah.
More than doing vanilla Street Epistemology. I was more into vanilla a couple of months, probably a month ago in the months previous, but now I'm getting get people to feel uncomfortable, put that pebble in people's shoes.
Yeah. I think, yeah. One person, he focuses mostly on religious claims, but a person who does a really good job with street epistemology focused on religious claims and getting into that uncomfortable zone is Pine Creek Doug. If you ever watch him, boy, he has some really great conversations, like with religious people. Like they're like quality, and it's not. He kind of straddles the line between street epistemology and like challenging questions, and like he, he does a good job of that. If that's the kind of thing you're looking for.
Who is
Pine
that?
Creek, right? I think I've come across.
Yeah, Pine Creek.
Oh
Pine
yeah,
Creek.
that's the one I mentioned a lot. I mentioned Pine Creek a lot actually as an example of the type of a seat that I would find myself doing if I ever get around to like actually practicing.
Yeah, there's a good video. This is my favorite recommendation for street epistemology for people who want to see that in action. There's a video that they did, the street epistemology. You know how they do those video reviews every couple weeks? They did one with Pine Creek on a video he did with a Christian, where he basically got the Christian to admit that like he really doesn't exactly believe it, or then he said, actually, that's not what I said, but like it's a quality street epistemology conversation. And like, if you watch the review, it's even better because you get to see like what Doug was thinking for some of the stuff, and how he was behaving, and like why, and some of the technique behind it. I think it was from earlier this year. It was maybe the spring or the summer. It was really good.
Did the flying man
Yeah,
experiment come into that review?
it
I don't
did. It,
remember.
it did. Yeah, it was a guy. He didn't show his face. It was just his voice, and they were talking about the resurrection of Jesus, and yeah, he kind of did the flying man, but really, it was more than that. It was the whole conversation. Um, let me just see real quick before we exit the room. I just want to see like when that video was made, so I could just point you to it, because I really think that's like one of the best examples of that I could find.
Yeah, and
Oh,
if
hey,
anything else,
real
you can
quick
just
too.
go to the search bar and put in, Street Epistemology Review Pine Creek.
Yeah, the name of the video is "Can I Try Something to Get You to Doubt?" and Pine Creek, and it's the Street Epistemology video review, and it was from 11 months ago, so beginning of the year, January.
Yeah,
Yeah.
David, you had mentioned some videos a while back too that you thought were good demonstrations of SE from Anthony, and I couldn't find that now that we're talking about this.
Oh, you might be talking about when we were discussing like how do we know this is effective, and
Right. And you said
the
there was like
video
a
that
quintessential.
yeah, there's I think you're in my Facebook group, and in my Facebook group there is a video in there n- um titled like 100 to 60 in less than 8 minutes or something like that. So it's actually a demonstration of somebody lowering their confidence level it within the conversation. So yes, it's self-reporting who really knows what their confidence level, how much it was affected, but it's just an example of a video that I can point to in case somebody asks, well, how do we know that this is even effective at all? May not be the best example or one that is foolproof or anything like that, but it's just a way to demonstrate
I think
that.
you mentioned Jamil Ponder's prayer. Was that?
Yeah, I think that's probably it, Jamil. Yeah.
Because I tried looking it up and I couldn't find it, so I'll try the other one then. Okay, thank you.
I, I'll send it to you somehow,
Okay.
so that you can check it out.
All right. Yeah, great conversation, by the way, all around. Gina, good job.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you. Great job,
cool.
you guys, too.
All right, everyone. Yeah, I gotta get going, so I
Yeah, me
appreciate
too.
everybody being here.
All right.
And we'll see you guys in Clubhouse hopefully within the next few days or so.
Okay.
And there you have it. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast and want to join the conversation or just listen in, you can find us in the Street Epistemology Club on the Clubhouse app, Saturday afternoon starting at 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Until next time, keep asking questions.